You maxed the pension, you bought the property, you kept debt low. Your net worth has been growing, and it still doesn't feel like any of this has made life easier. That gap between building real wealth and actually feeling it is what this video is about. That's the part of financial pressure people rarely say out loud. Not I'm struggling, not I made bad decisions. More like I've followed the advice, I've been disciplined and did the sensible thing for years. The progress is real, the numbers say so. And still, the feeling of security, of actually having room to breathe, hasn't arrived yet. And for a lot of people, that only becomes obvious when life asks a real question, a career shift, a change of pace, a moment when the money needed to move. And that's when they realize the income is still load-bearing, the job still feels non-negotiable. There's a phrase I keep coming across when people in this position finally name it. Technically wealthy, practically fragile. And I'm not going to tell you it's about comparing yourself less, or living more quietly, or behaving more like the top 1%. It's about something more concrete than that. The structure of what you've built, and whether it's actually designed to support the decisions your life is asking for. Here's the pattern I keep seeing. I was reading a thread recently. A senior professional, strong income, primary earner in the household. Her partner ran his own business, good income but irregular. On paper, a high-income household with real assets, property equity building, money accumulating inside the business, pension ticking along. So from the outside, they're doing well. Then her baby arrived, and she found herself asking a question I think a lot of people in senior roles will recognize. Not can we afford this? The question was, can I actually change pace? Even temporarily, even just enough to be present for those years that don't come back. There are real reasons that this question feels so hard. The identity associated with the role, the career trajectory, the industry dynamics, whether stepping back in reality means stepping out. Those aren't small things, but what I want to focus on here is the financial structure, because that was also making it harder than it needed to be, and it's fixable. The property equity was real, but not easy to reach without adding to the monthly load. The business wealth was genuine, but extracting it personally came with a tax cost they hadn't planned for. The pension was doing its job, just not the job they needed right now. And her income is still carrying everything, so the job still felt non-negotiable. She hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't done anything wrong. But the combined result was a real wealth, but no clean, easy route to reach flexibility under pressure. The baby didn't create that problem. It asked the question the structure had never been designed to answer. And that's not a failure in discipline, that's a gap in design. What her situation shows is something I see consistently. People who worked hard, built real things, and grown their net worth meaningfully. The individual decisions made sense, but somewhere along the way, the structure skewed. Sometimes it's the pension, heavy salary sacrifice, sensible, efficient. Then at 45, they have a huge projected pot they can't touch for another 12 years, and very little they can actually use now. As one person put it, I won the tax game, but I'm losing the life game. Sometimes it's property. Income rises, the upsize, rates are low, leverage looks sensible. The equity builds, but the mortgage and maintenance don't shrink. Property rich and life poor. Sometimes it's company money. Cash left inside the business because taking it out feels inefficient. So you keep telling yourself you'll extract it properly later. And meanwhile, you're working for a future payout while feeling the pressure of every bill today. The number was going in the right direction, but the question most people keep tracking is, how much have I built? The question they often miss is, what can it actually do and when? And the advice that shaped most of these structures didn't help. Max your savings rate, reduce your tax bill, pay down expensive debt, build assets, not cash. All sensible, but with a few problems. They're generic, they're not mapped to your income level, your life stage, and what you're actually building towards. It also assumes your life moves in a straight line, but in reality, career pivot, becoming a parent, wanting to step back for a while, life keeps interrupting the plan the advice assumed you had. A year before I had a baby, I had no idea I would soon be relocating to another country, leaving my corporate role, and starting to write the compound. I hadn't planned for any of it. I had spent years working towards early retirement at 45. The relocation changed everything, and those changes are not small or easy, but I don't regret it. What it showed me is that life rarely follows the financial plan you built for it. And when the direction changes, when something shifts that you didn't see coming, your financial structure needs to be able to support that change, not trap you inside the plan you made before it happened. And when life is moving in a straight line, nobody ever looks at the whole picture together. Your accountant optimizes your tax. Your mortgage broker optimizes the property decision. The pension runs in the background. Each part gets handled, but nobody asks what the combined structure is actually designed to do. There's no moment that forces the question. So the imbalance builds quietly without anyone noticing, including you, until something shifts. And that's usually when the gap becomes visible for the first time. So here's a more useful way to read what you've built. Your wealth has a level, the total number on the balance sheet. And it has a form, what it's actually made of, and what each part is designed to do. Most people track the level, almost nobody maps the form. I came across this recently and I haven't been able to say it better myself. Someone wrote, an asset can build your net worth without building your security. My pension is building my net worth. My house is building my net worth. But only my ISA is building my sleep. That quote captures something that took me much longer to explain. Different forms, different jobs, different timelines. When you map your structure through that lens, 3 questions become really useful. The first question, what is keeping the system stable right now? This is your immediate resilience layer. This layer has a few parts. You have emergency cash that keeps one bad month from becoming a bigger problem. You've covered the basics, no expensive debt dragging the system, relevant insurance in place. These are not glamorous, but without them, everything else is more fragile than it looks. And you have some room for the predictable but irregular, bigger expenses. House repairs, a car that needs replacing, childcare that changes, holidays, and the things that make life feel like life, not just a financial plan. Those costs are predictable, we just don't always know when they will arrive and how much. For people at this income level, not having this layer doesn't usually create crisis, but it creates constant friction. Every unexpected cost becomes a decision. Every decision adds to the load. And that low-grade friction is part of what makes it feel like money hasn't made life easier, even when the pension is growing and the net worth is heading towards the right direction. But if all the 3 parts exist, the stability layer is working. You probably don't feel it day to day, but it's doing a real job. And if life throws a curveball, it will help you steady the ship. The second question, what is building for later? This is your long-term layer, and it matters. Pension, long-term investments, property equity, and for some people, profits building inside the company. This is the part of the structure designed to support life later on, when work matters less or eventually stops. And the reason people build heavily here is simple. The incentives are strong. Pension get powerful tax relief, especially at higher incomes. Property offers leverage, and for a long time, the leverage was cheap. Company profits could be retained tax efficiently instead of taken out personally. So this layer didn't get built by accident. The incentives were real and the decisions made sense. The challenge is that those incentives made it easy to overbuild this layer relative to everything else. And property adds another layer that might skew the structure further. When you buy a higher value home or add more properties, the equity may be growing, but the monthly commitments around it usually grows too, not shrink. Mortgage, maintenance, service charge, and when rates increased, those commitments could get even heavier. So net worth rises, but the financial pressure of holding those assets rises alongside it. More wealth on paper, not necessarily more breathing room in practice. That doesn't make this layer less important. It makes it incomplete on its own. The third question, what would actually let me change something? This is your flexibility layer. Capital you can reach before pension age. Money that lets you step back, slow down, take time between roles, or make a decision without everything depending on the salary continuing at the same level. For some people, that means early retirement. For others, it just means the options to work differently, on their terms, at their pace, before the pension unlocks. And this layer matters because this is the capital that supports the life you're living now, the decisions in front of you, not the ones that arrive after 57. Someone put it well recently. I followed the flowchart perfectly, but life threw me a career pivot I wanted to take, and I realized my wealth is 90% illiquid. I'm stuck in a high-stress role because I optimized for 65-year-old me, not 38-year-old me. This is the honest summary of what happens when this layer doesn't get built. And yet, for many high earners, this is the layer that gets built last, if at all. In practice, it sits in ISAs or in accessible investments outside the pension wrapper, for example, a general investment account. Not always the most efficient places to build wealth, but accessible when real decisions arise. It's less rewarded by the system, and it has to compete for capacity against everything else. The pension comes out before the salary lands, the mortgage payment goes out automatically, the company returns profit before any personal payout. And then there are living costs on top of all that. The flexibility layer doesn't have a built-in mechanism. It has to be deliberately carved out of what remains. Which is why the practical fix is simpler than it sounds. Build it the same way you build a pension. Automatically, when the salary arrives, pay yourself for the flexibility layer first. If it has to compete with whatever is left at the end of the month, it usually loses. So here's a reframe. Most people in this position have built something real. The stability layer exists, at least in part. The long-term layer is often the strongest part of the structure. Pension growing, property building, assets compounding. But the flexibility layer is thin. And that combination, some stability, strong long-term assets, weak flexibility, is exactly what produces the feeling we started with. That's what happens when the 3 drops of wealth are all being down. Progress that doesn't register as security. Wealth that doesn't convert into options. A life that still feels like it depends entirely on the current job you're having. Someone put it simply, I used to think wealth was a number. I hit the number. Now I realize wealth is actually options. And because of how I'd structured things, I had fewer options than when I earned half as much. That's the shift. Assets build wealth, but structure is what turns wealth into security, option, and freedom. So the real signs aren't just that the number is growing, they are that the structure is doing its job. Some of your wealth is making life more stable now, some is building later, and some can actually support a real decision when life asks for one. When that's happening, the feeling does change, usually not in some dramatic moment, more like a quieter form of calm, knowing that you have buffers, the compounding is running, and the next decision doesn't depend entirely on the income continuing. And for most people watching this, the answer isn't starting over or saving harder. It's usually focusing on one layer that's thin or missing, most often the flexibility layer, and making the entire structure of your wealth more balanced. If you want to understand how the full system fits together, how each layer gets built in the right order with the UK-specific tools, that's what the compound is for. I'll link it below. If you have been putting money away seriously for years, and it still doesn't feel like it's made life easier, you're probably not doing it wrong. The discipline was real, the wealth build was genuine. What's often missing is a way to read in the whole structure once those assets are in place. Most guidance helps you build. Less of it helps you see whether what you build is doing the job your life actually needs now. That's usually where the gap is. If this feels familiar and you want to work out which part of the structure is actually creating this pressure, I've linked a small quiz below. It's a short review that shows you which structural profile you're in and what to focus on next. The review is completely free and only takes 2 minutes. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video.